Welcome everyone to my first video of 2023 and my first video covering CES 2023. I'm here in Las Vegas, Nevada, and just a couple weeks ago I got hit up and sent a couple boxes. These contain RTX 4070 Ti graphics cards. However, it was the last week of 2022, the beginning of 2023, and I didn't really have the time to properly benchmark these cards. Fortunately, I have a good friend, Brian, aka BPS Customs, who did run some benchmarks. So I'm going to give you guys a quick recap of his benchmark results, a brief rant about why you probably shouldn't buy the 4070 Ti even though NVIDIA lowered the initial base price to $800, a rundown of some of the important announcements NVIDIA made at their CES 2023 keynote, and an unboxing of these graphics cards, since as you can probably see, I haven't even taken them out of the boxes yet. My coverage of CES 2023 is brought to you by Cooler Master, Kioxia, Gigabyte, and ASUS. So we begin with a brief summary of the performance of the RTX 4070 Ti, and not to boil it down too much, but it's about 20% slower than the RTX 4080 16 gig. And remember that the 4070 Ti was originally supposed to be called the RTX 4080 12 gig, and after a bunch of consumer backlash, NVIDIA unlaunched it towards the end of last year, and now they've relaunched it with a base price of $800 versus the initial launch price of $900 that they said the 4080 12 gig was going to sell for. Now, because I haven't benchmarked these cards personally, because I wasn't willing to give up all of my family plans that I had made for the end of 2022, I did tap Brian, aka BPS Customs, and he has run full benchmarks on the 4070 Ti, and I highly recommend checking out his full video where he goes into much more detail than I will go into here. But to sum up, as many reviewers expected, based on the fact that the 4070 Ti has about 20% fewer CUDA cores than the 4080, it's about 20% slower. And whereas you might look at that compared to the 4080 and think, oh, well, 20% slower, but it's also $800 and not $1,200. Maybe that kind of works out to where it's still a competitive GPU. No, it's really not, because despite the 4080 12 gig having good performance, it is worth nowhere near $1,200. And in fact, I think the 4080 12 gig has sort of been set up as kind of a pariah at $1,200, but also an anchoring point so that other graphics cards at launch compared to it can actually look good. Like the 4090 seems like a decent upgrade because it has so much better performance than the 4080, even though it's $1,600 instead of $1,200. In a similar way, the 4070 Ti with 20% less performance, but also 1/3 less cost, seems like, well, maybe that's a better deal than the 4080. But as Brian pointed out in his video, and as you'll probably see a lot of other RTX 4070 Ti videos going up this morning reiterate, the 4080 was never in a good spot to be compared to from the beginning, and therefore should not be used as the 0 point to compare the 4070 Ti to. So again, check out Brian's video for more information and more detailed benchmarks, but here are the reasons why you probably shouldn't buy a 4070 Ti, even though I have a sneaking suspicion a lot of people still are going to buy one. First is that we're still looking at graphics cards that cost more towards the $1,000 price than, say, $500 or less than that, which is really the price point where we need more graphics cards available, and not cards that launched 2 years ago. We need new cards with updated architecture launching for those prices, and we're not being given them by AMD or NVIDIA. On the AMD side, the RX 7900 XT and RX 7900 XTX were not horrible performers, but they didn't exceed people's expectations, and they still cost $900 and $1,000. It seems like what consumers are being offered in the high-end graphics card market is all cards that they want you to pay those super inflated GPU shortage prices, and they want people to have it stuck in their minds that that's what graphics cards are worth, when we all know that those prices were caused by a variety of other factors, global shortages, as well as cryptocurrency mining. But if both AMD and NVIDIA can continue to launch graphics cards that cost that much, and people continue to buy them, then they'll keep launching graphics cards that cost that much. And I don't know who out there is buying them. I haven't really recommended many of these cards at their high prices. But for a lot of people who have been waiting and waiting and waiting for something to come out, eventually people break and then they get out their wallet and they fork over the cash. But that's not good for consumers, because if they can't sell the cards at the higher prices, they're going to have to lower those prices. And that's what we want, lower graphics card prices. Now, some might be looking at the $800 price and saying, well, Paul, didn't all of our collective bitching and moaning cause NVIDIA to lower that price by $100, bite the bullet, take the hit to their pocketbooks so that we could all save some money? And I would say not really, because NVIDIA has also shared the price stack for these cards, which are launching tomorrow on the 5th, by the way. Reviews are going up today on the 4th. I have here the TUF RTX 4070 Ti OC, which probably has a modest overclock. That is going to sell for $850, a $50 premium over the base price $800 card. But ASUS also has their higher-end ROG Strix cards, which they typically charge a premium for. The ROG Strix RTX 4070 Ti is going to be $950, a $150 premium, and the ROG Strix RTX 4070 Ti OC, if you want to manufacture overclock, is $1,050. $250 more than the $800 base price. And I would say, even if it was $900 base price, I'd still be like, $1,050 ASUS, what kind of crack are you smoking? People should just buy a 4080 for $1,200. No, you should just buy a 4090 for $1,600. That's what they want you to think. They want you to keep being like, well, let's just spend a few more dollars, because that's what they want, is more money. It's business, but it also sucks. I will also say, and this is a bit of speculation on my part, but I'm fairly confident that it's true, those base model cards that actually cost $800, they make a very, very few of, and they allocate many more of their chips to the cards that have a little bit of an overclock or a fancier shroud and cooler on them, and those they're charging an extra $150 to $200 or more for. Lastly, and this is a bit of a reiteration of some of Brian's conclusions in his videos, we're still a little offended that they were going to call this card an RTX 4080 from the get-go. Given the variance in performance from the what is now normal RTX 4080 with 16 gigs of VRAM, you can almost kind of see why NVIDIA went back to the drawing board and said, maybe we will get a little bit too much negative feedback on this launch if we go that route, and let's unlaunch it and call it a 4070 Ti and launch it the first week of January and make all the reviewers ditch most of their holiday plans and force them to run benchmarks during that time period. But okay, there's a bit of a rant on the 4070 Ti's positioning and why you maybe should reconsider buying one if you were thinking about jumping in and buying one tomorrow. But NVIDIA isn't just launching the 4070 Ti this week. They actually had a CES keynote, which they did not on CES Day 0, the 4th, but CES Day -1 on the 3rd at 8 a.m., well before most people had even arrived in Las Vegas. But that's okay, it was all just a pre-recorded thing anyway. And my theory about their keynote is that Jensen has finally achieved his ultimate goal, which is that he doesn't have to do anything for these keynote announcements. All of the presenters were other non-Jensen people, and even Jensen's presence there was just the mini Jensen, and even his voice was not his recording of his voice, it was just the AI regurgitation of the words that Jensen says sometimes that, you know, they interacted with. And we're like, oh my gosh, look at the little mini Jensen, he's so cute. But let's quickly run down what else they shared. They started off by talking about DLSS 3.0 because of course you need an RTX 40 series card for DLSS 3.0, and they want to promote those features to encourage people to buy those cards. They actually do have quite a few new games coming out with DLSS 3 integrated. The day before, Witchfire, Throne and Liberty, Atomic Heart, and Warhaven. For a while it seemed like it wasn't even an NVIDIA presentation, it was just NVIDIA promoting all these other video games that are coming out in the near future. NVIDIA also has 40 series mobile GPUs coming to market very soon, and in fact they have RTX 4080 mobile and RTX 4090 mobile graphics cards in the works, and they said that those laptops will start at $2,000 US, and I'm presuming that is for the RTX 4080 versions of those. They shut off the Alienware X16, which has an RTX 4090, but please bear in mind that an RTX 4090 in a mobile laptop, a mobile gaming solution, is not going to perform the same as an RTX 4090 discrete graphics card. The cooling situation is way different, the performance is way different, but you will likely see a lot of RTX 4080 and RTX 4090 mobile-powered laptops shown off at CES this week. They also announced that for GeForce Now users, the top tier, which costs $20 a month, is going to be upgraded from an RTX 3080 to an RTX 4080. And GeForce Now does have a fair amount of popularity with a subset of gamers that has a good enough internet connection, as well as a close enough location to the GeForce Now servers that they don't have to deal with a lot of latency. So it is nice that for that same monthly price, those users are going to get an upgrade. You can also enable 4K gaming at 240 Hertz via DLSS 3.0, of course, via the cloud, and I don't know what kind of bandwidth you'd need for that. And they announced an update to their NVIDIA broadcast software called RTX Video Super Resolution, which can basically take any video that you're playing that might be lower resolution and upscale it and use AI to sharpen the edges or to get rid of blockiness and pixelation from lower resolution video sources. They talked a lot about like cars and autonomous driving and the Omniverse and stuff like that, and that I don't know what it is about all those subjects, but I always just sort of gloss over them. So we're going to gloss over them as well and move on to a very quick unboxing of these two graphics cards that I have right here, because I feel bad because I've had them for a couple weeks and I haven't even taken them out of the boxes. Starting off here with a quick look at the ASUS TUF Gaming, and this is the one that does come with a manufacturer overclock, which makes it $50 more. $850 MSRP for this one versus $800 for the base model. And I'm sure lots of people will get this recommendation, but you should go for the $800 card and just manually overclock it yourself. That's probably going to be a better bet, because this card, for instance, only comes with a two-way 12VH power adapter. So as far as overclocking support, you're not necessarily going to have that much less with the non-OC version of this card. My guess is just that you're going to have a lot harder time finding that card for sale, because my speculation is that they produce a lot fewer of those. They'd rather produce this one that they overclock a little bit themselves and charge you $50 extra for. I could say also imagine my surprise that this is basically the exact same design as the ASUS TUF 4080 and 4090, although the cooler is pared down a bit. It doesn't need quite as much cooling for this smaller and lower power GPU versus the 4080 or 4090. There is your 12VH power connector, and I will say I appreciate that they have still included the dual VBIOS support. This is still a very expensive graphics card, even though it's a 4070 Ti, and apart from being irritated by the high prices, it becomes even more irritating when they start taking away premium features like the dual VBIOS, and that is definitely a feature that I would prefer to have if you're spending as much money as this card costs versus not having, because it's a very useful feature, especially if you do any VGA overclocking, or if you just want to have dual profiles set up so you can easily switch between one that's a little bit quieter and get one that gives a little bit more performance. In terms of video outs, ASUS has also continued to provide an additional HDMI output here, so you get two of those on this card. Also a little bit of a value add, but these DisplayPort connectors are still 1.4A, not 2.1. And then we have the Zotac card. This is the Zotac AMP AIRO, and this, you might be able to tell just by looking at it, is much bigger than the ASUS TUF card. Of course, we have our lovely hotel room lighting here, which is, mediocre, but I suppose it's getting the job done. But in a similar way to the ASUS card, looking very similar to its larger or older brothers, or however you want to call that, the Zotac AMP AIRO here also appears to be using essentially the same shroud and cooler as the AMP AIRO version of the RTX 4080 and the RTX 4090, although again, there might be some differences under the hood that I can't tell because I'm only opening these cards and looking at them for the first time. They did put a big plastic sticker over this part indicating that this card has high power consumption. So we can peel that off, and we can also peel this off here. I'm gonna say something positive. I've said lots of critical things in this video. I'm gonna say something positive. I thought of all the RTX 4090 and 4080 designs that I saw come out, that the Zotac version I thought looked the coolest. I'm not talking performance or anything here. I'm purely talking about aesthetics. But in a world of massive 3.5 and 4 slot, very brick-like, very boxy GPUs, Zotac managed to, put some curves on there, some rounded corners, and even the Aero cooler here on top has a bit of an undulation here. It sort of dips in a little bit, as well as having those rounded edges. And the RGB effects, although again, I'm not showing them right now because the card's not plugged in. I'm gonna do at least one follow-up video on this GPU. But the RGB effects across this very reflective piece right here also are not too shabby. They look pretty good. And also, thankfully, Zotac has not skimped on any of their premium features. You still have this little button right here, because this card also has a dual VBIOS. Hooray, dual VBIOS. Totally get a card that has one if you can. Now it is CES week, so things are very busy, but if I can, I will see if I can locate a full review for this card to post a link to down in the video's description, or you can stay tuned to my YouTube channel, subscribe, and hit the like button and all that good stuff, and I will do a little bit of follow-up coverage on this, because that's what I told Zotac I would do. I'll probably complain about the price and maybe compliment some other things, like, again, I think this card looks pretty good. Although I'm not sold on some of their marketing copy. Love gaming, power the win. Okay. Oh yeah, and did I mention this one comes with a 3-way adapter, so that is going to provide more power, 450 watts versus 300 watts with the two-way adapter. So that is something to consider for some of these higher-end GPUs. If it doesn't ship with the three-way adapter, the card is going to be limited to the wattage amount that the adapter can provide. So some of these OC model cards are going to be able to outperform the non-OC models, and there would not be a way to match that performance without providing additional power to those lower-end versions. So there you have it, guys, a kickoff, an introduction, if you will, to CES 2023. And again, I really highly recommend checking out the BPS Customs review of the RTX 4070 Ti. I'll link that down in the video's description, as well as links to my sponsors. And a big thank you to my sponsors for this week, ASUS, Gigabyte, Kioxia, and Cooler Master. I will be back with lots more videos and lots more new products. I'm hoping some stuff that's maybe not quite as disappointing in terms of value as the 4070 Ti is, but hit that subscribe button, hit the like button if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you all in the next one.